The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Can't hear me? So it's August 7th. It's birthday time for the National Housing Resource Center. We are now officially 2 years old. Congratulations, everybody. We made it. There were a few doubters. I'm not going to lie to you, but no, this has been a pretty exciting run-up, and really appreciate everything that everybody's doing. Matthew's got his party hat on. I've got mine on, and we've got the fireworks going and stuff like that. So it's been a festive place over here at the National Housing Resource Center headquarters. So let's dive into the agenda because we've got kind of a packed one. And so we're going to do a quick legislative update from Matthew and a reminder about the servicing survey that's still out there but closing soon. And we're going to spend most of the first half of this call on the HAMP interest rate resets. And we have Beth and Chris from Treasury here who will be able to give us, I think, a very good detail on sort of what to expect and especially what we can do as a housing counseling community. And then we're going to have our happy birthday celebration. We're going to have the board from National Housing Resource Center in an informal talk about how it's been and where we're going. We're just going to chat it up a little bit, and you're welcome to contribute to it as well. And just as a quick reminder on the HAMP conversation too, feel free to ask questions through the question box. We'll see if we can take a couple calls, but as you know, that's sometimes tricky on these webinars. So the question box probably works the best for us. And then, we'll do a final last plug for people to join NHRC, though we've had a very good year so far in terms of new memberships and renewals. So we really appreciate everybody's support. Okay, let's get down to it. So Matthew, federal funding, what's happening?
Yeah, thanks, Bruce. So folks probably know that starting this week, the Congress is out on August recess. This year is also, as folks I'm sure know, a midterm election. So really what's left between now and the midterms is for the House at least, where they're all up for re-election in November 4th. There's only 3 weeks where they're actually going to be in session. And some of those are even short days. There's basically very little time for legislating to happen between now and the midterms. So what that means, and obviously there hasn't been a budget, a THUD budget passed yet. So the most likely scenario at this point is that there'll be a continuing resolution to keep things funded, a short-term CR. It's likely will carry through, would be passed in those 3 weeks in September when they'll be there in early October, and would likely carry funding through through the midterms, and then see what the new Congress looks like and deal with it from there. Which is actually, as folks probably know from our earlier discussions, is probably a bit of a win actually for the programs that we care about, which there would have been a net loss under either the House or Senate budgets. So a CR, which keeps us both programs level funded for that at least short time period, is actually a net win for us. So kind of some good news and some bad news there on federal funding, but not a whole lot of it.
Though, and at the end, they'll somehow end up with a budget at the end of the year, and so it's likely that we'll end up with some loss, but so it'll get evened out.
Yeah, I mean, it's if they end up with a budget at some point,
right.
That's not I wouldn't take that for granted, but
that's a good point.
That's all on the federal funding. Just one other kind of legislative update is on something we've talked a lot about, which is tax relief for folks who receive a mortgage, have some of their mortgage debt forgiven. As folks know, for several years, maybe 4 years or so, it was excluded from taxable income. So if you got a principal reduction, you didn't have to pay taxes. You didn't have to claim that as income and pay taxes on it. that bill expired at the end of last year. We've been working on trying to get it extended now. It's still, so you see up on the screen, there's been some movement, which I frankly was a little surprised at, but they added 23 new co-sponsors, so now up to 137 co-sponsors for that bill. It does, even though it has some momentum, again, there's just such a short period of those 3 weeks to get anything done. It seems unlikely that they're going to get that done in those 3 weeks. The other difficulty with that, as we've said before, is that they really want it wrapped up in this bigger package of tax extenders, which is a lot harder to get through. So, this bill has always had relative bipartisan support, but getting it through has been more of a logistical issue than it not having support. So it does still seem unlikely that they're going to get anything through before the midterms, although everything we're hearing is that it is very likely that they will, in that period between midterms and the end of the year, that they will get something through. So again, that's, it's not great news because we all know that folks that are faced with decisions in the short term, it really affects their decision making, but we are still optimistic that they'll get it done before the end of the year and make it retroactive to cover the whole year.
And one thing that we're interested in is if you have stories of clients who could have qualified for the Mortgage Debt Forgiveness Act that were in place and now have to make a decision around whether to take a principal reduction or not, and especially if somebody's didn't take it or is leaning against it or something like that, if we could grab a couple of those stories and publicize them, we would love to do that this month. So if you've got anything like that out there, we're very interested in it. Please send them to Matthew.
That's all I've got.
Great. And then we also have the survey, the NCLR NHRC survey on servicing standards. How are we doing with that, Matthew?
So that is, it's going relatively well. We talked about it on the last call, and we did have some more folks respond, and we really appreciate everyone that has responded. We're still not quite where we want to be, though. So we would, absolutely, if you haven't done it, it takes a little bit of time. We estimate that it will probably take 30 minutes, but I just can't stress enough how important it is. We did share with some preliminary results with CFPB. Did a write-up of it, talked about the issues that you all reported seeing in the field, and it's really helpful for the folks that are crafting these rules to see, to get feedback from the ground, and really you're the best source of information to get to them about what's happening, what's working, what isn't working with the mortgage servicing rules and with many other things. So, I hope folks realize that taking the time to do this is really worth the time that you put into it, and we do really appreciate it. The link is on there, and I'll circulate it after the call as well.
Great. Thanks, Matthew. Please circulate the survey to folks so we can get a few more responses, and we'll be closing it up this month. Okay, great. So let's move to Treasury. So we have Beth Spring and Chris Dove from Treasury. As we all are deeply aware, the 5-year interest rate resets for HAMP loans are starting to come to fruition, and it means that people will see interest rate jumps at one point, depending what their circumstances are, what the terms of their modification are. So we wanted them to come in and talk a little bit about what that will look like, and especially what we as housing counselors should be prepared to do and how we can help our clients. So, Beth, I think you were going to take the lead. Are you ready to jump in here? We're very glad to have you.
I'm sorry, I just need to interrupt with some technical things. So we have, I think, a few people jumped on, Beth, with your login. So could we just have folks mute that aren't you mute themselves, and then I just need to figure out which one is you to make the presenter. So give me just 1 second to sort that out. All right. So hopefully you are now the presenter, Beth.
So
Beth,
that's not what we're supposed to see on the screen.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I'm gonna go back to me being the presenter, and I'll just move the slides for you, Beth.
Okay.
All right.
Small technical problem here, but we'll get through it quickly. Okay, that looks good.
Yep. Great. So thanks, Bruce, for having Chris and I join today. This is the rate increases is a hot topic at the moment within Treasury. It's certainly something that we're paying very close attention to. On the other hand, we also have been asked by servicers, since there's not a lot of data around exactly how borrowers are going to perform through these incremental step-up increase period, that we don't come out with a strong message and cause alarm to borrowers who may have indicated otherwise because they've been making their payments for the last 5 years, should be able to absorb these new rate increases. So the messaging around this has been very delicate, but everybody should know that it is something that we're tracking, and we will continue to track, and we have the tools, we feel we have the tools necessary to react should there be a huge spike in redefault rates. So with that, I have a brief presentation, and for those of you that are familiar with the program, this will hopefully be a refresher, and then for those that aren't as intimate with it, hopefully you'll learn something today. Some of it is pretty detailed in terms of the waterfall, and so I know Bruce said we'll open it up for questions at the end, but I'm also available. You can email me anytime if anybody does have any questions after they've had some time to digest the presentation today. So with that, we can slide to the next agenda. And as I said, so I plan to cover, and again, I created this presentation for this audience today, pulling from a bunch of other decks, so trying to meet the needs for you guys. And I thought it would be helpful to cover how the HAMP waterfall works. That's the standard waterfall. And then we have the alternative PRA waterfall, and then I'll discuss briefly just how the Tier 2 waterfall works. I'll discuss very briefly the comparison between how the MPV model runs for both HAMP Tier 1 and HAMP Tier 2. And then we'll get into the item of the day, the interest rate step-ups, and then the program options for homeowners, and that'll be key for you all, kind of knowing what's available for the homeowners so you can best assist them, and then just briefly mention resources out there for you guys. All right, so I always like to start the presentation kind of just hitting on some of the highlights program to date. And so those would be, nearly 2 million MHA assistance actions combined, meaning between modifications, HOFA short sales, and forbearance actions, we've touched nearly 2 million. So there's been nearly 2 million MHA actions. And then we have, over 26 billion mortgage modification payment savings. So pretty substantial, and then just the 7.8 billion incentives that we've paid combined to not only borrowers but servicers and then investors as well. Okay, so just to give everyone on the call a little background, HAMP was designed to operate as a core element of the MHA program, and the primary goal of HAMP, of course, is to help struggling homeowners avoid foreclosure by modifying those loans to affordable and sustainable levels, and this becomes, increasingly more important as, we look at these borrowers who at the time were modded to an affordable and sustainable level and now are facing a rate step up. So HAMP was implemented in 2009, and the current application date is December 31st, 2016. And as many of you probably know, the Secretary made that announcement on June 26th at our summit. And the message really was HAMP will be extended for at least an additional year. So it did push that December 31st, what was our previous deadline of 2015, out to 2016. We've received a lot of inquiries in terms of what does that specifically mean. And what that means right now is the program will be accepting applications through December 31st, 2016. Depending on what happens with the step increases, this allows us flexibility to extend the program should there be a need to. So more specifically, servicers must receive a borrower's initial package, including the request for mortgage assistance, by December 31st, 2016. The whole transaction has to be completed by September 30th, 2017. So no new real guidance there. That's just the specifics about how the deadlines work for the program. Now, by participating in HAMP, servicers and investors and borrowers may be eligible for incentives. This is always something that we try to make very known because we did do recently a survey on borrowers that redefaulted and wanted to get at how many of them know and understand how the incentive pay for success incentive works for borrowers and how motivating that is. And that also becomes key as I'll discuss about some of the options that we're considering internally at Treasury right now. So as long as borrowers provide and meet all the requirements and guidelines are satisfied, then they'll continue to get their pay for success incentive. Now, as I mentioned, we're currently looking at the borrower incentive component to see if there are ways that we can increase the borrower pay for success incentive to sort of help augment those that are going through future rate step-ups. And this guidance would be issued probably in the fall. So we're considering not only beefing up what the borrower pay for success incentive looks like, but then requiring servicers to offer a sort of recast to help bring that borrower's monthly payment down as they face the future step-ups. Now, taking it back to March 2012, we made the announcement not only to extend MHA, that was our first extension, but also to expand the MHA program to include what now is our Tier 2. So our second tier modification program was effective June 1st of 2012 and was intended to provide relief to borrowers that were previously not eligible for HAMP Tier 1 or for those borrowers that fell out of Tier 1. And we're currently looking at ways that we can expand this second tier modification program so that it's not only available to more borrowers, but it also sort of targets those borrowers that are going to lose good standing because of their rate step up. So there'll be more information on exactly the specifics of how we would like to tweak our Tier 2 so that it's available to borrowers. I also just wanted to add that the presentation highlights information that's contained in the MHA Handbook for Servicers of Non-GSE Mortgages, and hopefully everybody knows where they can obtain the handbook from our HMP admin site. Now,
can I just jump in and could you just give me a heads up when to switch the slide? I'm not positive if I'm in the right spot, actually.
Yeah, if you could go back just one slide. Right, and one more, sorry, actually.
All right, thanks, sorry about that.
Okay, no problem. So for, as I mentioned, for those that might not be as intimate with the program, this is what we sort of considered our standard modification waterfall. And how it works is, so we're talking about HAMP Tier 1 standard modification waterfall. So it's a series of steps that are taken to reduce the homeowner's monthly mortgage payment to a target payment ratio of 31%. So the steps include and are performed in this order. So first, either they capitalize accrued interest, out-of-pocket escrow advances to third parties, any other escrow advances that would be paid to third parties by the servicer during the trial period plan, and any other sort of cost obligations that accrued in performing the servicing of obligations. And then, so all four steps don't have to be performed if you can reach that 31% by, let's say, just capitalization, and the second step is the interest rate reduction. So that reduces a borrower's interest rate in increments of 1.2% until the 31% target payment ratio is achieved, or until the interest rate hits the floor at the 2%. So that is the floor. And then if you're still not at that 31%, then the servicer extends the term and re-amortizes the loan in 1-month increments not to exceed the 480 months until, again, that 31% target payment ratio is reached. And then the last step would be, to get that borrower to 31%, is the principal forbearance. So the borrower's principal is forborne in the amount required to achieve the 31%, subject to, we do have some excessive forbearance limits, which we are also looking at as well. So as I said, the waterfall steps must be performed in consecutive order, but they don't, all the steps do not need to be performed to reach the target payment ratio. So meaning if you capitalize all the arrearages and reducing the interest rate gets you to the 31% of the borrower's gross monthly income, the servicer stops there. This is very different than how our Tier 2 waterfall works. So next slide. We get, and I thought this slide was important because we do get a lot of questions around PRA. And so I just wanted to mention that.
Define PRA, please.
Oh, sorry, principal reduction alternative. So this is our alternative waterfall. And you can see, so with without PRA, you've got the target ratio is the 31%. You go to reduce the interest rate, extend the term, principal forbearance. And then with the PRA alternative modification waterfall, again, it's to provide relief to borrowers who are underwater and that have LTVs greater than 115%. So if eligible, you know, the principal is reduced and the reduction vests over a 3-year period. We do pay an investor incentive, which is the max 33 cents to the dollar. So you can see in the step 1 under the PRA alternative is, you know, the principal reduction is step 1, whereas in the standard modification waterfall, it's the interest rate reduction. So, and then moving on, so as I mentioned, Tier 2 works a little bit differently. Whereas in Tier 1, you're pulling the levers one at a time to get to a target ratio, the servicer essentially in Tier 2 pulls all the levers at the same time. So they apply the Tier 2 waterfall to reduce the monthly mortgage payment, again, by capitalizing, adjusting the terms of the mortgage. Now, if the pre-modification market-to-market LTV ratio is greater than 115, they can forbear or forgive an amount equal to the lesser of the post-modification market-to-market LTV, or 30% of the post-modification UPB. So in this scenario, the servicer pulls all the levers at once, and you're looking for the borrower's DTI then has to be within the range, and the post-modification front-end DTI has to be between 10 to 55%. So if the borrower's DTI falls within that range, then they're eligible for Tier 2. We did previously had a requirement, and we recently issued guidance that eliminated the requirement that the borrower's P&I payment be reduced by at least 10%. And now the reason we did that is because for borrowers that are coming out of a Tier 1, let's say they can make their Tier 1 payment, however, they won't be able to make an increased step-up payment. And so if we eliminate having the Tier 2 P&I payment be at least a 10% reduction, then essentially what we said, okay, borrowers, if you can make the payment you're making now, we can put you in Tier 2, and your payment should stay the same, and it just can't increase. So there is that one caveat. And as I mentioned, so a couple things that we haven't published yet, but that we're considering, is allowing the HAMP Tier 2 interest rate to go below market. So there was previously a 50 bips interest rate premium. And so let's say the current market rate is, you know, 475 or 4.75 plus the premium 50 bips. And then so the proposed Tier 2 would be the market rate minus the 50 bips. So bringing that you know, that rate down to 3.75. We're also, you know, we'll continue to look at how below market we need to go based on, depending on how interest rates increase in the future. So we're building that capability now. But again, any new guidance that I mentioned on this webinar today probably won't be publicized until the fall. And then, of course, we would have to increase the investor incentives in HAMP Tier 2 to compensate for the below market rate. Now, so servicers can establish a minimum principal and interest payment reduction requirement, provided that the reduction is no more than 10%. And servicers can choose a narrower acceptability range, just provided that the chosen range includes at least the core range between 25 and 42%. So servicers must apply the minimum principal and interest payment reduction and their chosen range consistently across all situated borrowers. So just a little side note there. And then I just wanted to briefly discuss how the MPV model works. So if we could go to the next slide. And I just want to caveat this by I am in no means an MPV expert, but I thought it was extremely helpful to just sort of explain how MPV is run as a single evaluation process. So as it relates to HAMP Tier 1 and Tier 2, the MPV will run as one function. So the MPV model runs the results for both HAMP Tier 1 and Tier 2. So the model itself will also calculate the results for both waterfalls. And as shown in the table for owner-occupied loans, when the MPV test is positive for both tiers, then they have to offer the borrower HAMP Tier 1. Now, if they're positive for HAMP Tier 1 and negative for HAMP Tier 2, the borrower must be offered the HAMP Tier 1 TPP. So when the results of the MPV test are negative for HAMP Tier 1 but positive for HAMP Tier 2, the borrower may be offered the HAMP Tier 1 at the servicer's discretion, and then if not, they have to be offered HAMP Tier 2. So then finally, when the MPV test yields a negative result for both tiers, based, again, this is sort of presupposes that there isn't an investor guided restriction, the borrower may be offered HAMP Tier 1 or HAMP Tier 2 at the servicer's discretion, or they can consider the borrower for other loss mitigation options, such as half a short sale. Now, when we talk about rental properties, as well as any other loans that are ineligible under our Tier 1 program, when the MPV test is positive for HAMP Tier 2, then again, the servicer must offer that borrower HAMP Tier 2. However, if the MPV test yields a negative for HAMP Tier 2, then the servicer may, at their discretion, offer the HAMP Tier 2 trial. So that's sort of how MPV looks for owner-occupied Tier 1, and then non-owner-occupied or ineligible loans under Tier 2. All right, so getting to the good stuff, the interest rate step-ups. So homeowners in Tier 1 modifications receive, some of the most meaningful payment relief available, considering that the interest rate that will go, as low as 2% for the first 5 years. And this is to increase the likelihood of their long-term success at avoiding foreclosure. Built into the program from the very beginning, and we get this question a lot, is why this function was even built into the program. And this was a concept that, was born with the program initially, that after the 5 years, a borrower in a Tier 1, their interest rates would gradually step up to the prevailing market rate at the time the modification became effective. So homeowners who have been in the program since 2009 will begin seeing those rate step-ups in the fall. I think Q3 is when those borrowers in 2009 that were modded will start to see their first step up. So where it becomes, the oversight becomes increasingly more important is when we move into 2015, considering most of the modifications were done between 2010 and 2011. So as we move into 2015, the interest rates are going to step up or will start affecting a larger group of homeowners. So homeowners in HAMP Tier 1 modifications will experience the gradual interest rate step up, and this is up to 1% per year until their rate adjusts to the market rate at the time of their modification. Now, we do get some specific questions about how many borrowers. So I think of the 900,000, some borrowers that are facing at least one interest rate. Or the 900,000 borrowers that are expected to face a rate increase, about 80% of those will experience more than one. So the majority of them do have multiple increases, but some of them will just have one interest rate step up, depending on what levers, again, in the waterfall were pulled at that time to get that borrower to the 31%. Okay, next slide. So this is just an example modification that's reached its 5th-year anniversary, and the rate will begin to gradually step up. And you can see, so after the modification, the interest rate was reduced from 6.5% to 2%, and the monthly payment was brought down to, around $1,200. So important to note that this doesn't include mortgage insurance, as we don't include MI as part of the HAMP calculation, but it does include P&I, taxes, insurance, and HOA fees, so all the rest. So the market rate at the time of the permanent modification, when it was prepared, was 4.85. So in years 1 through 5, the interest rate of the loan remained at 2%, so they got the floor, and the monthly payment remained at around $1,200. So from years 1 to 5, they're at a 2% interest rate, payments about $1,200. And then in year 6, the interest rate will begin to step up to 1% per year, so the rate's going to step up to 3%. And the new monthly payment would be, roughly around $1,342. So in year 7, the rate's stepping up now to 4%, resulting, in a monthly payment of around $1,476. So in year 8, the rate will have its final step up. It'll be at 4.85. That's the interest rate at the time the modification was prepared, and will remain 4.85 for the life of the loan. So that's sort of how, a borrower facing 3 step-ups post 5 years, this is kind of what it'll look like.
And we just had one question, which was the actual number of HAMP participants from 2009.
How many modifications were done in 2009?
Yeah, I think how many people are going to be in the range of having the step-ups begin?
I think there were roughly, I'd have to get that number. So I know in Q3 is when they start, and there's just a few, like less than a few hundred. But I think in total for 2009, there were maybe 33,000 loans that were modded. It just depends when the modification effective date was. So again, we kind of look at it by quarters. And really, 2014 and Q3 they'll begin to start resetting. But it's not until early 2015 when we have almost 300,000 loans that will, hit their first rate step up. So, and then it just kind of picks up steam from there. So, 2015, 2016, there's again an additional. So it's important to also, all the data that we've received and looked at sort of says, okay, it's likely that the borrower can make their first interest rate increase. It's when you start getting to the second. And as you're getting to the cohort of borrowers who are hitting their second step up, now you have this second wave that are hitting their first. And so it's problematic. And again, what we've seen shows that the further into the step-ups the borrower continues to or is able to make their payments, at what point, at some point if they were unable to continue to make those payments, it's kind of hard to explain, but the longer they continue to make that step-ups, the more likely they would be, if they disqualified or lost good standing, that they would be eligible for Tier 2. So we're certainly encouraging borrowers, to continue to make those increases, those incremental increases in their monthly mortgage payments when they can.
Beth?
Yeah.
So this is Bruce. So quickly, so we can distribute this set of slides to people, which I think will be helpful to them. There's no problem in circulating that, right?
I don't believe so.
Good. So,
and I know that we've had some, specific requests about the vintage year and the number of borrowers, and I think all of that was published in our blog. So if you could point your constituents there as well for the specifics of how many. I get into it, I think, a little bit in the next slide.
good. We're in a bit of a time jam, so we need to kind of speed this up a little bit. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, so as I was just saying, the specific time frames and payment changes for Tier 1 were outlined in our blog published in March of 2014. Most of the first resets are going to begin in the third quarter, impacting approximately, again, around 30,000 borrowers by the end of this year who received the modifications in 2009. I mentioned 80% of homeowners will face at least one future step-up. So the maximum rate depends on the market rate at the time of the modification. So for roughly about 92% of HAMP homeowners, this will result in an interest rate below 5%. So that's the good news. Now, I just wanted to discuss very briefly, next slide, what we're doing, meaning what is Treasury doing? So we're requiring an explanation of modification terms. So the servicers are required not only by Treasury, but they're required by the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau to notify homeowners anytime there's going to be an increase in their monthly mortgage payment. We also, as of March 1st, 2014, we introduced our post-modification counseling. So we are encouraging servicers to take a look at these borrowers facing rate increases, send them to counseling. We're requiring advance notice, 240 days or 120 days out, and then again 60 days prior to the first rate increase. We're continuing to work with servicers. We just hosted a big summit. We're in touch with them, what's happening, looking at their data. We've also got the HOPE hotline trained with talking points. We're talking with housing counselors. We've got our blogs. We've got information on our website. So there is information out there for homeowners and for trusted advisors. So the next slide, and Bruce, you can cut me off. I'm happy to come back to another time to sort of talk about. I think this is
this is the important part we want to get to, but let's do it as quickly as we can.
Okay, so everybody's sort of asking, what do we have out there that's available for a homeowner that might not be able to face, or might not be able to make the new payment? So we have our Tier 2 out there, and our current guidance says that if a homeowner has been modified, if the modification has been, less than 5 years and you've lost good standing, then you can be looked at for Tier 2, as long as it's 12 months after your HAMP Tier 1 was modified. So this existing guidance sort of is in place because we didn't want some servicers taking borrowers. If we allow them to look at a borrower for HAMP Tier 2, then essentially we're opening it up for them to take them out of HAMP, period. So we had to kind of put this criteria that says, you've got to lose good standing. After the 5 years, we lifted, the requirement that you lose good standing. So basically, if you've had either a change in circumstances and it's been 12 months since the HAMP Tier 1 modification date, then we can look at you for HAMP Tier 2. Now, the HAMP Tier 2 has a fixed rate of 2% for the life of the loan, so it does make it more attractive in that sense because there is no step-up function that's built into that tier. And where it gets tricky is we've never gone out to servicers and defined what a hardship is. So it could be that a homeowner is eligible for HAMP Tier 2 because their hardship is that mortgage payment increase. But again, that has to be at the discretion of the servicer. So another program that we talk about that nobody really likes to discuss is our HOFA foreclosure alternative. So a short sale. We are beefing up the incentive for the relocation assistance. So it's currently $3,000. It is going to be $5,000. We're also sort of considering if there are additional incentives that we can give for HOFA, if we can make that incentive to the borrower a little more hefty, perhaps tie it to some, job training or some counseling, then we'd certainly like to do that. And then on the next slide, we always have the hardest hit fund. So we are currently looking at this program, and for those states that do still have funds available, to see if there's a way we can point borrowers in the direction of their state HFA for assistance. And we encourage everybody to visit the MHA.gov website to find out, the HFAs in the appropriate state. So we always recommend, we list the sort of resources on the next slide for homeowners, and most of you are familiar with this. And then we also, you can escalate any case for a borrower to the MHA Escalation Support Center. Most of you have probably worked, this is on the next slide, with HSC. And then for those of you that don't know, we have a newsletter that would be helpful for you to subscribe to. It'll include any new information, upcoming events, etc. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. I know I kind of breezed through that.
So Beth, we are kind of in a time jam here. Matthew, is there one great question you? Okay, we're good. So we're going to move on. I should say that the housing advocates, have been fairly involved in really trying to figure out ways that might make Tier 2 work more effectively, so that it more matched what people's incomes are. I mean, the challenge of the rate resets is that incomes have been flat for many of our families, and some have declined, and so we need alternatives. Tier 2 as its upside. It's a life of loan resolution. It's you can deal with forbearance balloon in some cases for loans that are eligible, that are non-GSE loans. I mean, there's a number of pluses. The problem is that it isn't as well tied as Tier 1 to affordability, and it's currently at a market rate. There's talk about going to a lower below market. We'd like to see it go much lower on market. I mean, all those sorts of things we'll continue working on. So I think at this point, thank you so much, Chris and Beth, and we will invite you back in again as this all gets closer, and we have more issues to learn from about this. But thank you very much, and we'll circulate the slides as they were. That was very helpful. So at this point, we want to move on just as a recognition here that we've had today is the anniversary for the National Housing Resource Center. We have been doing the work for 2 years now, and first a big thank you to everybody who's participated. This has made us a stronger and richer organization. I think that in a lot of ways our ability to be successful is our ability to elevate the kinds of work and issues you have in the community that you've been raising, and often when we can figure out forums where you can be the people speaking directly to the issues. So we've invited the board members in. I'm not sure everybody was able to make it. But Matthew, who have we got on the line?
We have Judy Hunter, we have Jennifer Murphy, we have Ken Inadami, and we have, I'm missing one person, Lot Diaz.
No. Is Lot on?
And we have Linda Ingram.
Oh, okay. Great. Well, so welcome aboard. I mean, I think first I'd like to say that the role of the board has, I think, been under-recognized in NHRC. I mean, these folks have put in a lot of time, a lot of thought, and a lot of creativity. It's helped really guide the organization. So my big thanks. Wouldn't be here without you all. So I'd love to give a round of applause to the board and all the great work they're doing. And so I actually just wanted to open up the conversation a little bit by just asking, what your sense of what was one of your favorite moments of National Housing Resource Center's activities in the last 2 years. So who would like to dive in and give us something to start with?
This is Judy. I'll start.
Great.
So I think it was 2 years ago or thereabouts that you organized a meeting for housing advocates at the White House. I got the time frame right? It's about 2 years ago?
Yeah, it was.
And so when you, started this agency, I was pretty excited about it forming, definitely saw the need. In Rural Community Assistance Corporation, our housing counseling program is a very small piece of what we do. And when I talked to our CEO about why I wanted us to become a member, it's like, well, all right, not a lot of enthusiasm. But then after the White House meeting, it was like, oh my God, this is a pretty great organization to, just after starting to be able to get something like that organized. So, we're all very happy to be a part of the National Housing Resource Center here. So thank you.
Great.
Bruce,
Who else would like? Yeah.
Bruce, this is Ken. Just let me just share with the group that the incident that just happened, and that is just last month, July 22nd, our friends at the Center for New York City Neighborhoods hosted a training session for the housing counseling agencies in the New York City area. Bruce was kind enough to come up from Philadelphia. And in addition to a lending training, we invited Bruce to talk about NHRC, the mission, the vision, where things are going. And basically he had a group of, there are over 40 of us, he had a group pretty much enthralled by how he articulated what we can do as a national body. I think a lot of the people on this call, you're doing a lot individually. You can even be doing a lot on a regional basis. But to have someone like Bruce and to have someone like Matthew on staff to be protecting our interests, to be representing our cause in Washington at the national level, with training, with information, with funding updates, it's invaluable. So just want to give a hat tip to both Bruce and Matthew for the work they've done and how far they've taken us in such a short amount of time.
Bruce, this is Linda
Yeah.
from the Midwest, and the point I'd like to make as far as NHRC is kind of what Ken said. We're a national organization, and people on the East Coast and West Coast voices sometimes are more pronounced than those of us. I'm in Missouri, and there are other, Midwestern states, and it's so important because though we're all involved in housing, there are different regional issues in housing, and I remember when we were able to meet with the staff of the banking committee, and I just thought it was important that they hear from all over, not just the voices that they hear on a regular basis, but I think our organization is so important, like Ken said, because it's a national organization, because we need to address all of our housing issues.
Great, and it's pretty key that we make sure that we're reaching, when we deal with the Hill, that we're reaching all the constituencies, and getting the Midwest and the South well represented in these conversations really helps a lot, and especially in the way the Congress and Senate is today.
Well, I guess that leaves me.
Jennifer, you're up.
This is Jennifer from New Jersey Community Capital, and I actually started with this when I was at the Center for New York City Neighborhoods, so I want to give props to my old organization. And there, I think, when Bruce and I, when we first met, I know this is going back to the very beginning, way, way back, but fate and foreclosure brought us together on a train from D.C. to Philadelphia, and we realized, I think, as we were talking then, first of all, how long the two of us have been at it, but also how the pieces that were missing and how important it was. And I know you had already started a lot of this work when you were with the HUD intermediaries and at Acorn, but we really talked about coming together and kind of bringing housing counselors and housing counseling from all over the country together. And you know, kind of focusing on what we have in common and working together. And I think, you know, what came as an idea, you've done miraculous work with. I know I said to you a few weeks ago that when I read your message about joining, I thought, wow, how much would it cost for each of our organizations to hire Bruce and Matthew? How many of us could afford that? And for the price of membership, you work for us. You bring us all together, and you keep everyone coordinated and working on the same page and with one voice most of the time. And so I think that, to me, that's my best memory. But if I have to go to after we had actually become an organization for real, it was the very first meeting we had in Washington at the NeighborWorks training, and I realized, you know, this was really going to happen. And that was you. You did all the work, and you really should be highly congratulated for that. So, happy birthday.
Yay. Well, I do think it's a we operation, and this is, you know, all of this works because of the deep collaboration with the board and with people in the field. And I just have to say that people have stepped up day in and day out to make this work. I think we all understood the need and the value, but you kind of that's different than actually doing the work and doing the calls and the sign-ons and coming to the meetings and putting together, writing pieces on for HUD, or doing we're doing a task force now on high-cost loans, and people have just sat down and really tried to put serious stuff together. You know, that's all has to do with people in the field. I mean, the fact that we could put together this FHA directory really on a week's notice, and within a week had, I think, 60-some-odd groups sign up. And then within the first couple months, we were at 90. Now we have way over 100 groups that are specializing in FHA back-to-work counseling that the directory works on. And, you know, we'll do things like that in the future, but it's all about people stepping up and making it happen. Well, so this is great. And do people have some thoughts about where we should be going in the future? What should we be doing?
More members.
More members, yeah.
More members. Everybody bring a friend.
You know, it's interesting. I mean, we have 75 groups that are members now, which is good, which is very good. I think as a startup, this is a pretty good number. I had really thought we'd be at 200, so I'm a little surprised. You know, that was my goal. And I think that, and the very good thing is that members are renewing. So we have very little fall off, so that's very exciting. Really appreciate that a lot. But membership growth is going to be key to our work, and we're going to try to improve the value for members and do things that are specific for members. And we'll have stuff to roll out this fall on that. So we're trying to increase the value, but you know, this is becoming a core piece of our budget and of our program.
Bruce, I think it's so valuable to be a member, not only to keep in touch with everything that's going on, just like the presentation today, but I think also to have our voices heard in places where they wouldn't be heard otherwise without being a member of NHRC. And I remember, and I know that you still reach out to Treasury and to HUD and all that, but I think what's very interesting, what's happened over the last couple years, is that they're coming to you now. They're coming to NHRC. They want to know what housing counselors are dealing with, our experiences, and that's just crucial for all of us. So I think membership is, for the value, for the cost of it, is almost a no-brainer.
Yeah, there's definitely something to be said about how many people are behind you.
Yeah, and it is a question I get fairly often.
Yeah.
So that's a real part of our work.
So thank you, everybody who has joined us. Thank you.
Good. And more thoughts about where we might be going, what we should do and be thinking about in the future?
I think, Bruce, that the continuation of the relationships that you've forged at HUD with the Office of Housing Counseling, at Treasury, at CFPB, just, all the great work you've done to solidify with real credibility the relationship between NHRC and the key agencies in Washington, I think, is huge, and I think the continuation of that would always be in our best interest. And then the other thing is, to the extent possible, I would invite some of the other regions in the Midwest, and in the West and the South to invite Bruce out. He makes a huge impact on an audience. Very few people are as knowledgeable across the board on all the issues as Bruce. And if you want to hold a membership build meeting at the regional level, he could be a tremendous resource to present.
And I should say Matthew has been went with the New Jersey Coalition a couple times already, and but I've been to meetings in New York. Sylvia Alvarez's group in Tampa, and we also had a meeting of counselors in Tampa, which has really informed the policy debate. So very interested in those where we can interact with people and be able to figure out what the policy issues are. I've referenced this Tampa meeting actually a number of times in the access to credit conversations that are going on, and part of the question is access to affordable houses. That housing prices is becoming as big a challenge as mortgage access is. So trying to think about what those policy things would be to help make our work more effectively. I've been out to California and to Utah for the rural conference, and this is really helpful to me because I look at it as a two-way street of where we can learn what's happening in the field and get a much better sense of, going to the rural one was fascinating because, we go to the Hill, we're talking to Republicans, we're talking about in doing finance reform that you need to have some components that are tied to underserved markets, and Republicans have often been pretty negative to that part of it and called it special treatment. But when you talk about rural as being an underserved market, you change the conversation, and it allowed us to get in the door in a different way. And that's because I was being educated going out to this meeting. So that stuff is really valuable, and we like to do it. So let's figure out opportunities where there's going to be a good crowd, and specifically housing counselors. We're very interested in those.
Bruce, one thing I think that's going to be coming up is as HUD finally releases the final rule on certification of counselors, I think it's going to be a challenge for a lot of agencies to figure out how to make it work and how to keep their line of business open. We're seeing quite a few, especially our rural agencies, that maybe just have one housing counselor, and when they lose that counselor, it is such a challenge on how to keep that program alive. So the certification just makes it possibly even more complicated. So your help in, helping agencies, go through that, what the final rule looks like, I think will be helpful.
Yeah, I think we'll have an educational component, but we'll always have an advocacy component to what we do as well. So we need to keep an eye out of what's working and not working. And also, sometimes it turns out that the way something gets interpreted has unintended consequences, and maybe if we elevate the issue, we could get a different interpretation that might solve a problem. And using the leaders listserv or these calls as a forum to raise things like that, that'll be very, very useful. Well, this has been great. I want to again say a big thanks to everybody getting us here. Huge thanks to the board, who's been very committed and visionary to this work. Big thanks to you out there in the field who are both doing the work and contributing to what we're trying to accomplish here. I know we're at the end of our hour, so just one quick alert. So we won't do another call in August, so vacation time, and we're going to start up full strength the first Thursday in September, September 4th, and Matthew will send out the registration link there. I bet certification will be maybe a topic on that call. Certainly the settlements will be a big topic on that call. Although the B of A settlement has come down, there's the Citibank one, the SunTrust. We're still trying to figure out what's happening with Chase, even though it was announced a long time ago. We're going to be very interested in the fall to try to make the most of that. And we may have some work on outreach to bring new clients to people and ways for them to get paid for the work that they do. We may have some information on that as well. So we're expecting to charge into the fall, and that'll be exciting. And let's see. So please think about joining National Housing Resource Center. We really appreciate all the support everybody has given. It really does strengthen our work. Certainly you can get the discounted credit reports. We do send out emails about funding opportunities. We'll really make more robust this fall the resources that are available to you. But, really the reason to join is that it's part of making us stronger as a movement, and that's what our goal is. So happy birthday, everybody. Thanks so much, and been great talking with you. All right, we'll be in touch in September.
Thank you.